Now, if you lived in the Hamil area of BURSLEM at the beginning of the 18th century, young Molly Leigh was a girl to be wary of. She was then about 15 years old, but was already a strong-willed and difficult girl. People said that she could bend anyone and anything to her will. She had no scruples about cheating people when she sold produce, frequently selling watered milk. Moreover, she refused to attend church. Everyone was afraid of Molly. She had strange, wild eyes, and people said that if she stared at a child, she could cause it to become ill. If anyone upset her, those weird eyes would also cause cattle belonging to the offender to become lame. She had in fact the power of the evil eye. As she grew older, she preferred her own company to that of friends and neighbours. Her only companion was a black raven that perched on her shoulder whenever she went out. People noticed that this familiar would sit on the roof and watch them if they walked by her cottage, and everyone believed that it then told Molly who was passing. It was also thought significant that the hawthorn bush by her cottage never came into bloom. What went on inside that cottage was unknown, since no neighbour ever dared to enter. However, they were sure that she had been dealing with the devil, entering into pacts in exchange for her supernatural gifts. On one occasion, the Reverend Thomas Spencer tried unsuccessfully to shoot Molly's raven. He spent the next 3 weeks in sheer agony, unable to walk. The villagers concluded that Parson Spencer had incurred Molly's wrath. While her company was avoided by all and sundry, most residents of the locality regarded her with a mixture of awe, fear and respect. They knew she was a witch, but, after all, she was their witch. In this way, Molly Leigh lived out her solitary life for 63 years. In March of 1748, Molly died. She was buried in St John's churchyard by Parson Spencer on the 1st of April. Because she was a witch, her grave was dug north to south at right angles to all the other graves. After the burial, the parson and the mourners went first to the Turk's Head to fortify themselves with hot punch. Then they set off across Jack Field towards Molly's cottage. They intended to purify the witch's home by means of prayer and hymn singing. When they arrived at the gloomy cottage, the mourners hung back for the parson to enter first. He hesitated, then flung open the door and strode in. Seconds later he raced out and fled back towards the Turk's Head, followed by the curious villagers. Safely ensconced in the tavern, Parson Spencer took another drink and informed the others that as he had crossed Molly's threshold, he had seen her there, sitting by the fire. Their imaginations ran riot. They had been willing to put up with a witch among them when she was alive, but the notion of a dead witch among them was terrifying. As Molly was obviously too much for one parson to cope with, it was decided that he should call in 3 more. Vicars from Stoke, Newchapel and Woolstanton. The 4 clergymen agreed on a plan of action. At midnight on the following Sunday they approached Molly's grave, chanting prayers as they did so. They ordered the sexton who accompanied them to dig up the witch's coffin, then climbed down into the grave to examine it, but were startled by a hoarse croak. They looked up to see a raven perched on the rim of the hole. Convinced that this was Molly's familiar, come to watch what they were doing, they panicked and ran away. However, before he fled, Parson Spencer managed to grab hold of the raven with one hand and lift the lid of the coffin with the other. He threw the fluttering bird inside, let the lid drop again and scuttled after his fellow preachers. Later the 4 men found the courage to return to the Molly's cottage, where they prayed that the witch's ghost should leave the Hamil area forever. They may not have been completely successful, as sightings of the Hamil Witch reoccurred throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. She was often heard singing, "Weight and measure should I never, milk and water sold I ever." 80-year-old Mrs. Eaton, whose family has always lived in the Hamil area, tells me that she was always afraid of Molly's ghost as a girl. She believed the other children's tales about the witch until her father told her that his great-grandmother claimed she could remember Molly Leigh. Mrs. Eaton's family have always insisted that Molly was not a witch, although they did admit her appearance was rough and witch-like. She discounts the tale about Molly's black raven being entombed with her, though she does fully accept the story of her ghost being seen in the cottage after her burial. The tradition in Mrs. Eaton's family was that the villagers piled extra stones on Molly's tomb to keep her spirit in. She thinks that the BURSLEM witch legend is due to the superstitious nature of the BURSLEM people of the 18th and 19th centuries. Not everyone agrees with Mrs. Eaton's assessment of Molly. Even in the 20th century, BURSLEM miners would not go down the pit if they met a cross-eyed woman on their way into work. They would not take the risk just in case the lady with strange eyes was in fact the ghost of Molly Leigh, the Hamil Witch. Mr. K. Booth of Hanley tells me that Molly's ghost still haunts the area, appearing to a friend of his whose bedroom overlooks the churchyard.